Hi, this is Mackenzie. Hey, this is Owen. Don't forget to like our show and subscribe.
This podcast is brought to you by the Love and Kindness Project Foundation. What is one thing that you could do to think, speak, or act kindly today? Go to loveandkindnessproject.org to learn more. Before we begin this podcast, if you or someone you know is in crisis or needs emotional support, there are tools that can help. So get yourself a pen and paper or open a note-taking app on your phone or computer. Feel free to pause this episode while you get yourself ready. The episode starts at 1 minute and 6 seconds. You can call Talk Suicide Canada at 1-833-456-4566. You can text 45645, which is coming in the fall of 2023. In Canada, you can also call 988, the Kids Help Phone at 1-800-668-6868. The Trans Lifeline in Canada is 1-877-330-6366. And in the United States, 1-877-565-8860, or call 911. You are not alone, and you do not have to be alone. I would like to honor and recognize the traditional and unceded territories of the Katzie, Kwantlen, and Semiahmoo nations on whose territory I live, work, and play. Welcome to We Are the ADHD Family Podcast. This podcast is meant to chronicle our journey with ADHD, autism, and other discoveries along the way. I reach out to advocates, experts, individuals, and other families that want to raise their voices and empower those on their journey. My name is Mark Smeets, and I am passionate about removing barriers for others through creating connections and building on strengths and practical problem solving. I am married to Siobhan, a parent to 2 wonderful kids, and all of us have ADHD. I want you to feel like you have power and hope. And now, into the episode. So the other week I came downstairs and I'd asked the kids to get ready. So I yell from upstairs and I say, "Hey, are you guys dressed?" And both the kids answer yes. Fantastic. So come downstairs and I notice that Owen's in his underwear. He's got socks in his hands and he has no other clothes. And I don't know how he thought, he just turns to me and he goes, "But I have socks on." Like, they're on your hands, son. This is not dressed. Welcome to a new episode of We Are the ADHD Family and the Advocators. Well, in the previous episode, I was talking about the reaction that I received my wife and I received when we tell people, "Hey, our son's autistic," or "I have ADHD," whether it's to friends, families, other people that come along, just that reaction. And quite honestly, I'm stunned by the range of responses that I received, or that we've received rather. And I didn't understand why until some self-reflection later on, and now I understand why I was hurt. People just don't know how awesome both of our kids are. And so in that episode, I shared some stories of just some of the amazing things that we've been able to do with my son, with our son, and with our daughter, just not having the pressure to be that rock star or rocket scientist or the president of something or other, that she is free to be who she is. One thing that I don't think people understand is that a diagnosis really is the key required to get any sort of help or assistance. I think there needs to be a bit of a reworking on that phrasing, but it's not just to get any help or assistance. It's really about helping us build our kids to be the amazing people that they can be. And I think as parents, we see that, disability or no disability. But these things get viewed as a label. And again, I believe I referenced the scarlet letter hanging around somebody's neck. And that's not the case with this. So in this episode, I decided to reach out to other parents, and I wanted to ask them basically 7 questions about their experience to see, were there any similarities, differences, how they felt, what they did to react when they found themselves in such similar situations than my wife and I did. I am very grateful that my 3 guests were willing to share their experiences and be so open. All of us hope that you don't feel alone when it happens to you, and that you can respond in a strengths-based and kind way to educate somebody, and you can show them how amazing your kids are. Let's get into the guests. And my guest on this segment of the show is Jeff Barshawa. And Jeff, could you give the audience just a little intro about yourself?
Awesome. Well, Mark, it's great to be back on with you and to be on your show. I am a curator of connections. I am a full-time professional networker, and basically I spend my days helping businesses build communities that bring them raving fans.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And Jeff is going to be a future guest on the podcast, so there will be more for that later on. Let's start off with the first question. When you tell someone that your child has a disability, do you use that specific terminology? Do you say disability? Does it depend on the situation? And spoiler alert, I know that you are not a fan of the word disability.
Yes. So it's interesting. I think both of my sons have inherited some of their dad's unique characteristics. I like to focus on, and you had a great word last time we talked. I think it was ability-based parenting.
Strengths-based parenting.
Strength, yeah. And I honestly, we talk a lot about coping mechanisms. When I have to tell somebody I try to avoid telling people about my kids. I try to teach my kids more of the coping mechanisms so that they can self-regulate and they can help others. But rarely do we focus on the word disability, because I think that implies that everybody else is normal. And yes, I know there's some instances where you do have a handicap. If you need to change gears, my boys both have OCD, they don't change gears well. They need, hey, in 10 minutes we're going to do this, or in 15 minutes we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Don't spring surprises on them, because they don't like it.
Yeah. Does that go for positive and negative surprises? Negative, obviously, but positive ones?
They just don't like surprises. And
Gotcha.
That's, we've kind of adopted the, obviously you're not going to tell them what they're getting for their birthday or something, but for the most part, we tell them, good, bad, or otherwise, hey, today, here's what's going on. We over communicate, and that just keeps them very regulated. So, it's, if we don't communicate, we all pay the price for it.
Yep. That was one of the big factors that we learned with our son as we were raising him and trying to understand that concept of front loading is just the biggest thing that no one ever tells you about until you've kind of discovered it. And it's such a huge, yeah, I can't understate or overstate how important that technique actually is. What do you do when someone replies in a way that shocks you? Like, I mean, I know you and we've talked before about, the word disability and how you've explained it. And I happen to like one thing that you say about, implying that everybody else is quote unquote normal, and there's a difference, right? It's very much like myself and the word, accessibility and accommodation, right? I don't like the word accommodation because it implies that I'm trying to get to, I'm not going to a hotel.
Yeah.
It's not like that. But when you get that reply back from someone who says, whatever it is, how do you reply to that person? What does that make you feel? Does it make you second guess things?
I think really, truly, it's rare. And part of it is, again, I prepare people, and I usually lead with like their father. So if somebody insults my kids, they know they're insulting me. It rarely comes up. I do get the odd, my least favorite phrase is, "Oh, they seem so normal." Take that back. It's like,
Yeah.
and I'm just going to say your kids are underwhelming. If you want to insult my kids, I'll insult yours. But usually, most of the reactions we've had are sort of disbelief or surprise. Very little judgment so far, other than I do hear a lot, "Oh, they're high functioning." And that particular phrase I don't love, because it's rude to the people who may function differently.
Yeah.
I know, I've got a couple of kids that are in my world that are nonverbal, and people call them low functioning. And I'm like, they're smart
Not the
kids.
case. Yeah, they're smart kids.
You're just too damn lazy to get down to their level and figure out
Yeah.
what their strengths are. And I actually helped one mom. She spent a lot of time being told all of the deficits her son has, and just by hanging out with him, and I see him at school drop off and pick up, I made a comment and I said, "Wow, he's really strong at this." And she was like, "Oh my God, nobody's ever told me that."
Yeah.
So I'm always looking for the positive. And if somebody's truly negative, if they're a healthcare worker, or they're getting in between my kids getting help they need, they're going to be bulldozed. One way or another, they're going to help the way we need them to help us. If they're just a random person, their opinion doesn't matter to me, and moving on, right?
Yeah.
But my 10-year-old, he'll tell you exactly what's wrong with you if you tell him what's wrong with him. So
good on him. I like him.
they've been forewarned, Mark. And we do a lot of role playing too, just so that they're prepared for it.
That's good. Well, and like, I mean, the thing that you were talking about, over communicating, I mean, we do the exact same thing. And that role playing part of it is something I don't think my wife and I have really done that piece too much. But, we talk about these things, and then we try to do kind of a debrief after something's gone wrong, like especially after last night, where I was asking my son, how does he feel when, like, he didn't want anybody upstairs near the bedroom because he didn't want his bed messed up. And my daughter had a friend of hers over. And so he's getting very territorial, very angry, and very worked up. And it's just like, how do you that's something you can't really deal with in the moment. But, this morning I woke up and I'm like, how did it feel last night? Did your brain feel hot? Did it feel like you had any control at all? Where do you think there was an opportunity at some point to stop and rethink things? Because he sure as heck wasn't listening to me or my wife. And so, you have to go, you talk through those things and try to figure them out, and just try to say, well, let's try this next time, and I'll help cue you if you need me to do it, or something like that. Just be a guide as much as you can.
The good thing is, I spent most of my childhood trying to figure out how to fit in. So I can recognize it faster in my kids. And that's the thing, when somebody's unregulated, or, in that moment, that is not the time to course correct. If somebody's lid has been flipped, you're not going to do anything to bring them back to course. But if you share techniques and things up front, and I'm really working on, and this is never perfect, we're not going to ever solve it, but I try to anticipate, okay, here's what we're going to run into, here's what might trigger you, are you ready?
We've got a similar routine with our kids, with both of them as well.
Here is a 20-second kindness break.
Mackenzie, what is one kind thing that you can do for somebody who is new to your class?
Show them around.
Owen, if you see someone is having a hard time, what is one action that you can do to help them?
Take the time to listen to them.
Hi, this is Siobhan from the Love and Kindness Project Foundation. Check out loveandkindnessproject.org and find other ways to carry out kind acts or start a kindness project of your own.
Tana is guest number 2. Similar routine with our kids, with both of them as well. How many people have tried to quote unquote fix, air quotes? I'm doing the air quotes. Of course, you can't see that in the podcast. But how many with ideas or remedies, or have you tried this herbal supplement? Oh, this could, this will help do such and such.
Yeah. Pretty much, it's everybody's got that. Here's some free parenting advice because, it worked on my kid. So take it and apply it to your kid. A lot of people have offered, and I appreciate, some people come from a place of caring and they just want to help. Other people, it's genuinely a place of ignorance, and I know they don't mean anything by it. They just don't know any better. I like educating those people and helping them see the path they're stepping down. And then there's some people who just, they know everything and they want everybody to know how smart they are. I let them argue with my 10-year-old and they walk away educated, knowing that he was clearly smarter than them. So I enjoy those.
I do. I increase a lot, I have to say. On the free parenting advice thing, the question that came up into my brain is that do you find that there's a difference between the parents that don't have a child that is, I don't know, that is ADHD or dyslexic or what have you, versus the ones that do have that? Do you find a difference in the type of advice that you hear, or the range?
I've never really pondered it until you shared your questions with me. Interestingly, the people with kids that have special needs tend to share things from an experience point of view. Hey, Mark, here's what I did. Here's what worked for my child. Whereas people with neurotypical kids, and my least favorite is grandparents, the grandparents tend to give you the here's what you should do advice. But most of the advice we get tends to be from people with neurotypical kids. And what works for a neurotypical kid, do this or do that, doesn't work for, my kids didn't get the memo. Here's how you should behave. They didn't read the book on it.
None of us got the memo. None of us got it, I tell you.
and our instruction manual was lost when they came to us. So, we just kind of, we're pretty smart parents, and my wife gets a lot of credit. This works. Do more of that. That causes screaming. Do less of that. We're pretty good at, there's only a handful of things that trigger our kids to the point where they're really difficult to have around. And most of those things we can see coming a mile away. Kids that are hungry, kids that are thirsty, kids that are tired, they're less regulated, and spoiler alert, that applies to all kids. So we make sure our kids, have naps if they need it. We make sure they get sleep at night. We make sure there's always, my wife is the rock star of snacks, and, there's always snacks and beverages. She never leaves it to chance. You go out to a day at the zoo and, hopefully they'll have water there. Well, what if they don't?
Yeah. Have you ever had anyone declare to you that they don't know how to respond?
We had one lady who suggested that we should drug our child, having a little freak out on an airplane because
that's bad.
Spoiler alert, the flight was delayed by 4 hours, and they thought, let's have the people sit in the tarmac in the sun. He was hot, he was thirsty, he was hungry, and she suggested medication. I suggested that I'd like to put my foot up her backside. We agreed to disagree. So, it's the reality is I see myself as a giant shield around my kids, and
Mhm.
whatever abuse I need to take to make sure they get what they need. We rarely get denied twice.
Hmm.
So I can be persuasive when I have to be, and I've learned to advocate for them because a lot of parenting is people are worried about what other people think or what other people are going to say about their kids. All I care about is, are my kids happy and healthy?
Yeah.
So if they need food, they get food. If they need water, they get water. If they need a quiet space, there's a quiet space.
What do you want people to know about your kids?
I think the biggest thing I would say is that there's this perception that, low functioning, high functioning, this is actually a fun fact, but a vast majority of accountants and engineers somehow fit on the spectrum because they're that detail oriented, they're introverted. Like there's a lot of misconceptions. You could be very, very, very introverted, you could be on the spectrum, and you can appear to the outside world to be very intelligent. But some of the quirks that you might see, like I get called aloof, indifferent. I don't care about small talk. So I think that's the
Yeah.
big thing, is recognize when you're being annoying, because what might be normal to you might be abnormal and annoying to someone else.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you want people to say to you when you disclose?
I think, I'm a naturally curious person, so I ask questions. So when people, when I share, and like I said, I always lead with my diagnosis. I'm more open about it. I'm okay if people ask me questions. So I'd rather they ask questions than go, "Oh, I understand." No, you don't. So I think I'd like it if people were a little bit more open to, because people ask me questions and then they shut it down because they get uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
to me, again, we're all laboring under this assumption that there's this narrow range of average. The world's way more interesting, having people that are different.
Oh, yeah.
A friend of mine's writing a book called Welcome to the Spectrum. And I can't wait to see that published, because I think people will realize that, we're not difficult to make your life difficult. Sometimes we're having trouble figuring out how to deal with the other person.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's any other, like before my diagnosis, I know that I always had trouble trying to figure out how to deal with other people too.
Yeah.
Now I have my diagnosis and I understand perfectly why that was.
Yeah.
But every other person, sort of goes through that too. So my last question, and I'm going to put you on the spot for this one because it just came into my brain. But one of our sponsors is a group called the Love and Kindness Project Foundation. And their motto is basically, what's one thing that you can think, speak, or act kindly, whether to yourself or somebody else. So I'm wondering if you have a kindness tip that you can share.
I would say my kindness tip would be, when you feel ready to give somebody advice, take a deep breath and realize that maybe you don't know exactly what's going on. So it's just a little bit of, I give people grace so that they give it to me. So I would encourage people, just number one, take a deep breath, give yourself some grace. Nobody's regulated all the time. Nobody is perfect all the time. But the magic is the grace you extend to yourself. That's not carte blanche to be a jerk, but if you give yourself grace when you slip up and then you say, I'm going to try to be better tomorrow or later today, that magically filters into the people you connect with, because they'll give you grace back. And it's fun because they'll start to give themselves grace. So just by being kind, we can make the world a better place.
I like that a lot. I happily to wholeheartedly agree with that too.
And my bonus tip would be, if you see a kid having a tantrum, that is not the time to offer advice.
No.
The parent's not going to listen. The kid's not going to listen. You're getting in the middle of something. Literally, there's a gear switched in the brain. Nobody's going to benefit by your feedback or involvement. So just walk away. Make sure everybody's safe.
Offer something to the parent where, maybe you can push their grocery cart or something like that, like something practical, right? Where it gives them a moment or something like that to really help. Because I know you and I have both heard stories about all those kind of situations and things. And Jeff, that was it for the questions. And thank you very much for sharing your insight, coming on and sharing this, because I know it's going to help a lot of people, and I really appreciate your time.
Well, Mark, it was a real pleasure, and I love the work you're doing, because I think the more people understand differences, neurodiversity, I think the easier it is for us all to get along and to thrive and grow. So thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the thoughts and conversation we just had with our guest. I have split up the conversations into 3 separate episodes, since we had 3 guests, so I hope you're going to check out the other stories and hear about their lived experiences. If you want the full version, though, please consider becoming a subscriber.
Thank you for listening to our show.
If you're hearing this message, you've reached the end of the episode, and for that, I want to say thank you. I hope you have enjoyed what you've heard and are walking away with newfound knowledge.
We are the ADHD family.
See you soon for a new episode. I have 3 things to ask of you. Number 1, if you have any comments, questions, or guest ideas, please leave a comment on the Facebook page. Number 2, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps people find us. And number 3, if you want to be a guest on the show or know someone who would make a great guest, contact me through our Facebook page. This podcast is open to everyone. You don't need to be an expert, just passionate and want to see change. The opinions expressed by the host and guest are not associated with any employer or organization unless otherwise stated. Any medical information on this site and podcast is provided as an information resource only and is not to be used or relied on for any diagnostic or treatment purposes. This information does not create any patient-physician relationship and should not be used as a substitute for a professional diagnosis and treatment. Please consult your healthcare provider before making any healthcare decisions or guidance about a specific medical condition. The show, host, and its guests expressly disclaim responsibility and shall have no liability for any damages, loss, injury, or liability whatsoever suffered as a result of your reliance on the information contained in this site or show. By visiting this site and listening to this show, you agree to the terms and conditions, which may from time to time change or be supplemented by the show host.